Hey guys, it's Danny, or should I say good morning? It's really early morning and I'm having my coffee. By the way, this is my very old merch mug. This is what happens if you put it in the washing machine. I said this in a previous video, but I will remind you, if you are buying mugs from my merch shop, I thank you so much. Do not wash them in the washing machine, given this damage has been done over the past 3 to 4 years in the washing machine. And these are I don't have mugs, these are the ones that I wash every 2 to 3 days in the washing machine. So this is what's gonna happen. Anyway, besides the point, today, as promised, I'm gonna take you along as I repot my little Tolumnia orchid. If you remember, a little while back, I showed you we had some rotting going on, and if you missed the video, I'll link you to it down below, of course. We removed the leaves that were not good, and actually half of the orchid rotted off. It was an orchid that had 2 directions of growth, and one of the directions is completely gone. This one had issues too, but on this one, the damage was not so extensive, so we just plucked out the leaves and everything was okay. But we have an issue. Look at this orchid. Now, this doesn't necessarily concern me because I could very well just put a bamboo skewer here and stabilize it. Okay, no issue. But what is very concerning is something that we've talked about in the past as well, but let's rehash. What is most concerning is that this orchid has some roots that are growing on top of the medium, not inside the medium. And in a living room setting or a home setting, this only means that these roots will not get proper hydration. We've had in the past a case with a cattleya, which again, it's very common to happen and it can be confusing. It was a cattleya which was dehydrating even though apparently it had roots. Well, it only had roots at the top. So what we did was we repotted it, we tucked the roots inside, and now she's absolutely fabulous. There is also an update in the pinned comment to that video. But anyway, this is the same case. So this is something you never want to have on your orchid. If you have an orchid which has some issues down below, and this one we can tell has some issues, right? There aren't many, if any, roots inside the pot, but we do have good roots on the top, and I filmed a close-up to show you. You never want to have the situation with any orchid. Phalaenopsis either. So it's not about monopodials and podials. You don't want to have the situation in a home setting. Even though these orchids, yes, they are epiphytic, and in nature, you know, they're not potted. Well, in nature, we also have dew, rain, all of that fun stuff that hopefully we don't have in our living room. You know, it's bad if it rains in our living room. So we have to adapt. We have to make sure that these roots are getting hydration. There are a few ways of doing that. Of course, the easiest way is to just put some sphagnum moss maybe on top and make sure to spray the orchid from time to time until the roots go down inside the medium and benefit from those few days in which the pot stays moist. That's one way to go about it. I will not do that because it requires time, it requires maintenance and observation. I mean, you have to be on it every day to spray that sphagnum moss, maybe twice a day if you live in a warm climate or you have a warm environment. I have a warm environment. It's kind of dry as well. It's not a solution for me. Where are my gloves? Oh, here they are. So what I intend to do is actually repot this orchid, which I wanted to repot anyway, and try it out in a different type of pot this time because this environment is not as hot as the other one. I can control it better. Not going into the details, but I like to have different types of setup to present to my videos. So I'm gonna take this opportunity and put it right here in this opaque pot because I don't have any more rePotme pots. I used them all. I really like those pots for Tolumnias. Sorry, it's early morning and I just started to talk. Yeah, so I'm gonna use this opaque pot. It's absolutely fine. Roots don't need light, no worries. So if you find yourself in a position where you don't really have time to baby an orchid like this, I would suggest repotting it. So what am I doing? I cannot really press on this pot. I'm just gonna like dig in a little bit and push up. There we are. Well, this orchid doesn't really have roots, so I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's okay. And yes, it would help if you would pre-soak the pot, but I just didn't do it. Let's see. Okay, this root, a little questionable, but maybe still alive. We're just gonna let it be. This root, not alive. Did I get my pruners upstairs? Of course I did not. So let's cut away everything that is dead. All of these roots were inside the pot and they were actually doing nothing for the orchid. Let's put the coffee away. We don't want sphagnum moss in our coffee. So this is what we had in the pot. This is what was sitting in moisture for a few days, and everything good that has a natural growing tip was up top. I don't know about this root. It's a little so and so. I'm gonna let it be and see what happens. Even if it dies off, why do these roots fly in my new pot? Even if this root dies off, you know, it's fine. So cut away all of these roots that are not good anymore. They're dry. There we are. This orchid has quite a few new growing tips and a new growth here. It's great. Righty. So this is what we're left with. The vast majority of my good roots are right here. Not ideal, so I need to make sure that these roots are inside the pot. So I should have pre-soaked my sphagnum moss, but I didn't. I'm discovering I don't mind working with it dry. It retains more air pockets this way, and I'm okay with that. This is an epiphytic orchid, and even if I am aiming for good water retention for my environment, I still want to have air pockets. So we're gonna pot this orchid like usual. The potting mix will have to depend on your preferences. In my environment, I really do like a mixture of sphagnum moss and bark, and I like to layer it as such because it's more even. It gets wet, or actually damp, a lot more even. You don't have that wetness at the bottom and dryness at the top if you layer it like this. This will not happen in all environments. I'm just doing this for my environment. Right, so I'm going to place the orchid with the old growth towards the edge so I have more space, and the new growth towards the center of the pot, like so. And I will actually bury, quote unquote, this orchid a little more. I will make sure that these roots here on top, they're not on top anymore. I want them to be in the first layer of moss for me, because this is the moist layer. The top layer of bark that I always add is not there for moisture necessarily. It helps, like it's like a mulch, right? It helps with retaining that moisture, but what it does, it prevents the moss from having cyanobacteria, which happens. Like if this moss gets some light, you can see here, we get cyanobacteria. For me, this is not algae, this is cyanobacteria, which is different. It's a bacteria and it can create toxic byproducts and can burn roots. So it's important for me to shade it. Again, this will not happen to everybody. You don't necessarily need to do this if you don't have to. It's just something I need to do. So we can see the roots are in the sphagnum moss layer. They're not like buried, but they're sitting here in the moist layer. I don't need the sphagnum moss to be compacted on top of these roots. I need it just to be in the presence of the roots and contact a little bit with the roots, because the roots will absorb. Again, I don't want to suffocate these roots because they've been in the air, but I want them to be in the presence of moisture. This is what keeps them growing. You will think that epiphytic orchids actually are super drought tolerant and they prefer dryness. It's not the case. It really isn't. And if you look up Tolumnia orchids, yes, they do grow on branches and stuff, but they're coming from areas that, at least from the images and footage that I've seen, they get a lot of either rain, either morning dew. They get water every single day on their roots, maybe all the way through the night. So they do benefit from a lot of moisture, even if it's not in the form of rain in their natural habitat. And you will observe this with Tolumnia in your living room. They are more thirsty than maybe some articles make you think. They are tiny orchids, they have very fine roots, they don't grow. These roots don't grow so well in a dry environment. They can grow aerial if you have a lot of humidity, of course, if you have maybe dew all night long. If you have them mounted and you have that type of environment which promotes high humidity, that's absolutely fine. But if you have a dry living room or a room or whatever, they're just not gonna perform the same, they're not gonna grow the same. So we need to adapt a little bit our growing style. And this is what I'm doing. Those roots are in the sphagnum moss layer, which is very moist, but also very airy. The point is not to compact, right? And let me tell you a secret, sphagnum moss retains more water when it's fluffy, not when it's compacted. The fluffiness is what retains those water droplets. If you compact it, it's not gonna retain water. It will get wet, yes, and it will also be suffocating, but it will not retain as much water. It's just gonna be bad. So the fluffier the better. I'm a little all over the place, I feel like, but I hope you get the idea. Whenever you have an orchid that has roots only on top, make sure those roots are not on top anymore in the dryness of your home, especially if you have a very dry home. Especially in winter, if you're using heaters and such, your house might actually be drier than in summertime. So we're all different. We all have different environments for our orchids, but in whatever way you choose to, make sure those roots get hydration, because what will happen if they don't is that they will not grow. Roots stop growing if they don't have enough moisture, and the orchid will dehydrate because we don't have any roots inside the potting mix. So whatever route you choose to go, make sure you get those roots hydrated, because no matter how drought tolerant an orchid is, it has a limit. Let's put a date. January 25. Oh my goodness. I also did not add any slow release fertilizer because this orchid barely has roots. It's a tiny orchid. We don't need it. I can just rely on my MSU. I usually combine the MSU with slow release because sometimes I just don't have time to prepare that water. And most of my orchids at this point are heavy feeders. I have big Cattleyas, big Phalaenopsis. They require a lot of food. This guy doesn't. We can rely on me fertilizing it only with the MSU and it should be just fine. So even if it looks a little bit buried, remember this is just the mulch, quote unquote, layer. This is just the bark, which is very, very airy. It does not retain any type of water. It's just there to shade the sphagnum moss, and the sphagnum moss layer is what starts to be damp and moist, but it's not soggy wet because I made it so airy. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to water this orchid. I'm going to run water through the pot. I will go downstairs to do so because I have softened water here, but that's about it. And I'm just gonna put it on a normal watering schedule. I will make sure that it dries between waterings. Since it doesn't have many roots, it's gonna dry slower than my other orchids. It's easy to tell when these orchids are dry, even in an opaque pot, because if I press on the top a little bit, if it makes this sound, can we hear? Let me just try. I hope you heard that. It's crunchy. It means the sphagnum moss is dry. That's when I'm gonna water it. If I press and I don't hear that scrunchy noise, no need to water it. Also, I can look a little bit on the bottom, and if I see the sphagnum moss, you know, through the drainage holes is dry, then I water. If it's not, I let it be. So yes, they are drought tolerant, and I don't keep them super soggy or anything, or super damp even all the time, especially in winter when the temperatures are not so high. But I don't let them dry for too long. Tolumnias don't like that in my experience, quite at all. And the drier your environment, the more water they will lose, the more frequent watering they will need, because they will not be so, let's say, tolerant to big amounts of drought. Through their stomata, they lose water, and if the air is very dry, they will lose more water. Righty, so that is about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Short and sweet, I hope, but it is an important thing that you have to keep in mind, especially in a home environment. Don't rely on the fact that epiphytic orchids will grow with their roots everywhere. They will do that in nature, not in our living room. It's a totally different story. So address it, because you will lose an orchid to dehydration. And you'll be like, well, I have roots on top. What is going on? I water it every day and nothing happens. You have to have roots inside the pot, not on top of the pot. And sometimes spraying will not do anything either, because either you're gonna miss a day, and it's crucial you don't miss a day. You're gonna miss a day, you're gonna have to spray a couple of times a day, maybe you won't have time to do that. So maybe a repot and a repositioning of the orchid is much safer and more beneficial. Up to you. I'm just telling you, like, the practice. Because there's one thing to talk about the theory, and there's another thing to talk about the practice. And I'm not ashamed to tell you, practice sometimes gets me. I'm not the best at the practice, so I'm inventing foolproof methods. Right, so with that said, let's stop blabbing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this and you learned something. And I hope this will help you out if you ever have one of these cases, because they do happen quite a lot. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye.